Hello, everybody. Please give me a shout. Make sure that you can see me and hear me. That would be really useful. So basically, I'm hoping you can all see me now, and I hope you can all hear me. If there isn't, I need someone to sort of wave at me a little bit. Um, I'm not going to be doing a demo. So when you go to like a concert and you've got that big act that comes in, and then it's sort of the peaks and the troughs. I'm probably I'm one of the trough moments of the day. So you can have me on in the background if you need to wander around, if you need to go and make yourself a snack, or if something like that. You can just have the audio on for me. I will be showing things. It's not just going to be me you're looking at. Hi everyone. Hi, popping in. Beard16. Thank you very much for your little demo just there on those butterflies. Not seen that before. Really liked that. I'm glad everyone can see me better this time. Last time I did a live stream, I only did it on Wi-Fi, and needless to say, the signal wasn't very good. So I've bought a 30-meter outdoor grade cable. So I'm now plugged in Ethernet direct into the workshop. Okay, this is going to be a little bit question answer. Absolutely, any questions, please put the word question or a couple of question marks at the start, and I can jump in on that. I'm going to talk to you about wood. I'm going to talk to you about all different types and kinds of wood and recognizing wood. And we're going to start with one of the more underrated timbers of time, which is ash. And if I can get the light, okay. So this JP turned a bowl out of this morning, really nice one, which he then shosugi banned it or burnt it a little bit and then stained it. Now, the reason why I have a block like this, other than because having a nice block of wood is helpful, it is cut in such a manner, if I can get the light to work well, I might have to block off one of those windows, that you can see all of the different grain structures on it. So ash, also Latin name Fraxinus excelsior, as Dale stated. Welcome to the Virtual Craft Festival, by the way. So this wood is exceptionally versatile. It is a hardwood. All the woods I'm going to be showing you today are hardwoods. And there's a book which I didn't bring out here with me. I'll try and remember the title, and I'll put it in the description afterwards. And it's basically one guy's love story towards the wood ash, and it can be utilized for everything. It's so versatile. You can steam bend it. It's really good for a lot of internal furniture. It's good for musical instruments because it's got really good properties of dealing with vibration. And it's also really good for things. They used to be used an awful lot for like wooden wheels and carts because it bounces, it flexes. So if I turned that into a vase or a bowl and I dropped that onto a concrete floor, whilst you would get some minor impact damage on the outside, the whole thing in effect would be like a tennis ball. It would sort of compress and expand itself back out, and it would be very unlikely that it's going to shatter unless you hit it magically on that one fault line, which if you're a wood turner and you've just finished turning something you've spent several days working on, you're probably going to do that if you drop it, because that's the law. So that's kind of my example block. That's kind of like my default start, so that you can see the differences between things like end grain, so your tree rings and the expansion and the growth rings there, and then you can see them on the side, and you can, let's get the light right, and you can also see face grain. So from the point of view of identifying timber, there are two main things. One is obviously looking at it. So it's really important to try and sand, or if you can, plane faces to have a look at it. And the other one, actually, not on every timber, but on a lot of timbers, is also smell. So ash, particularly when it's green, it's really difficult to describe, but it's like quite a musty smell to it. And you can often tell if you've been working with ash for quite a while, and you'll kind of build up that sense memory towards it, as you will with a lot of other timbers. Timber is fascinating. I mean, I'm a woodworker. I'm going to love it. A lot of you guys out there are woodworkers as well. The other thing about ash, it's a native species to Europe and America. I'm using the generic term ash. There are many subspecies. And along with that, and also beech, you can see the rays quite nicely there. Ash and beech, and also sycamore. It's one of the three what we would call like naturally hygienic timbers. So you'll quite often see, for instance, with beech, almost all of your European shop or store bought things like rolling pins, wooden spoons, all that kind of stuff. A lot of chopping boards are made out of beech because it is naturally hygienic. The old butcher's block boards. Larry, you've got a very good point about wetting it to see the grain better. And I have got my industrial spray to do just that, and I had forgotten. So they have all the chopping boards and all that kind of stuff. Will then, there you go. That's a little bit easier. If I can get my eyes as to where the camera is correctly. There we go. So that's ash. So they're all chopping boards and things like that. Are more often than not, they'll be made out of beech. So if you're unsure how to identify a beech, certainly grab your rolling pins. It was a really good one. So beech can be identified quite readily by these little flecks. So all those little flecks there that you see in there, and the wood's kind of like this orangey yellow, sometimes a little bit of pink in there as well. And the other ray, or the rays rather than flecks, to look out for are in this bit here. So you can see them all across there. So this is quite useful if your wood is already cut or planed. What wood takes Yorkshire grit best? Now that's an interesting question, actually, JP, because beech is a close-grained timber. Ash is an open-grained timber. They're both hardwoods. They can both be steam bent. They've both got elements of similar properties. But if you were wanting to use Yorkshire grit, you will get a higher polish finish off a close-grained timber than you will off ash. Both will look great. Both will work really well, but it will work better on a closer-grained timber. So, for instance, if we go for some things that are slightly more exotic, let's have a look here. Here we go. This is going to get a laugh. So this is a finial end that happens to look remarkably like other things that you can discuss in the comments if you so wish. This is a piece of bubinga, and the top half of that I have polished, and the bottom half is just left off the tool. Now, you can see that it's got a mixture of open and closed grain, but you can also see how much shine you are getting off the top of that polish there. And that's because of the density of the timber. So when you're considering timber for a project, if you're not just turning a bowl for the sake of turning a bowl, for instance, if you're wanting to make a piece of furniture, or if you're wanting to do something structural for outside, you need to really consider exactly what you're working with. You need to look at the way the grain is. You need to know if it bends an awful lot, then that is going to have a deciding factor. So, for instance, my workbench is made out of beech. An awful lot of workbenches are traditionally made from beech. If you mix timbers, so close grain and wide grain, then you'll end up with potential of it moving at different rates. Because one of the beauties of wood when you buy it and you make something out of it is that it won't just stay at that size. It will expand and contract with the seasons as they go along, which can sometimes be a problem when you're selling it to people who don't understand wood and they just want to buy a natural waney edge timber that they can then stick on a wall or make a shelf out of. They don't necessarily understand that it's got a high moisture content. That's going to get lower as time goes on, and then it's going to twist and it's going to warp and it's going to do all that kind of good stuff. So we were chatting about spalted wood in the in Rich's butterfly thing just now. Let's wet this one down. I'm not surprised you spend a lot of money on beech each year. It's quite a highly used product. So that's a nice piece of spalted beech there that is I've got on my desk, as it were, or actually on my workbench. I was just looking to see if you've got any. It's quite a dense piece that's quite nice and dry, so that's not going any further, so that's not a problem. Let's put that back on there as my reference point. Now, some of the other native timbers can start to get a little bit more interesting. So this here is a piece of yew. This is a failed project piece of yew because basically it was getting smaller and smaller, and the crack in it was just not disappearing. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this live stream wetting the wood that I am holding, and we will leave that comment exactly where it is as well. I hope no one's too sensitive when watching this video. Right. So yew has these beautiful changes between sort of your pith and your heartwoods of the white and the oranges, and yew quite often there's all sorts of I was going to use the word fables. That's not the right one. Folklore. That's the word I'm looking for. Folklore that surrounds all of this kind of stuff. So yew in particular is quite often found in churchyards in the UK. There are some that grow on farmland. There's not that many that get that big anymore. Yew planking, you can get. Scotland certainly has a lot of yew that hasn't been chopped down and just harvested, and you can get some good planking in there. But I got a phone call from a tree surgeon recently. He said, "Oh, I've got some yew. I've got some stumps of yew. Do you want some?" I said, "Yeah, sure, bring it round." And what he presented me with, give me a second and I'll drag it round for you, is this piece here, which it's another way of identifying yew is this particular type of bark, but it's full of a huge amount of branch outlets. So I'm going to have to cut that down into sections to process anything with it. I won't be working on that one for a little while. As those of you who don't know, I'm currently trying to upgrade my my existing wood store, and the wall behind us here is going to disappear as part of that building project. Question: is there any way to help prevent yew splitting? Okay, so if you get given a piece of green timber, or freshly cut timber, or you don't know how dry it is, it's always best to seal any exposed ends, particularly on the end grain. And you can use a variety of products for that. So Chestnut products sell a product called Enseal. Enseal is exceptionally good. You can use watered down PVA glue, or, as my default non-salesman personage would say, those cans of high gloss paint or gloss paint you have kicking around in the garage from projects that you finished and you've still got a bit left over, you can paint that on the ends. You can literally paint gloss paint on the ends of it just to stop the moisture from rapidly leaving the timber. I would also personally always date at least the month and the year that you get the timber. So if you've cut it down, or if someone's given it to you, whatever, I'll have like October 19 written on it, because you'll be amazed how often you'll end up piling it up, and then you'll come back to something to work and you go, I wonder, and the fact that it says like it's been there for 2 years, you'll know that it's going to be a little bit drier than a piece that might be next to it that you only got 6 months ago or something like that. So other than that, the only other way to help prevent yew splitting, sorry, I just spotted back, Dennis, there is beech, also known as linden pine. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to look that one up for you. If you are turning yew, as Larry Woodworks has just pointed out, first of all, wear a respirator. I would argue if you're sanding any turning, when you get to your sanding point, first of all, use an extractor. And second of all, if you have any form of lung infection or history of lung illness, or if you're not sure about the wood, wear a powered respirator if you've got one. But wear a respirator anyway when you're sanding, even if you've got an extractor, because dust will get everywhere. Woods like you don't like being sanded at high speed. Some of us will sand at high speed. You doesn't like it. If it heats up too quickly, it will crack, particularly if it's thin. People like to turn goblets and other such things out of you, and that will quite quickly end up splitting if you're sanding it too hard and too fast. And prevent you splitting. Apologies if I have missed anyone's questions. You will have to repeatedly tell them or make it quite clear to me, because otherwise I will just ramble on for the entire hour. Okay, so just nipping back to beech a moment and talking about the different things you can use beech for. So I have a project here. You might have seen on my Instagram a little bit further back. This very odd shaped product here is basically one of these. So not exactly to match that one. My in-laws go out to Jamaica and teach woodworking to kids out there who basically they've not got an awful lot of other chances. And they had a lathe out there and the pulley sheared off. And the original pulley they had was a timber pulley. So they brought it back to me, and it was several pieces of wood that had just been nailed together. And they said, "Oh, can you make us another one of these?" So this was my first attempt at returning, but all as one piece, a wooden pulley for them. My second piece went a lot better, and that got sent out there. So because it is a nice dense timber and because it is sort of workable, basically what I did with the other one was I finished turning it, and then I flooded it with about 10 different coats of sanding sealer, just to sort of really fill it and to help reduce the changes. Thanks, Larry. That's a good point. If you put caps, it will be easier for me to see. Okay. Has anyone got any questions about specific timbers that they want to look at? I'm going to carry on talking anyway, but if you've got specific ones, I may have examples of it, because if not, I'm going to start moving on to some more of the exotic timbers. We'll talk about this one for a moment. So this is a piece I turned and polished of black palmyra or black palm. So this one's really interesting because technically it's a grass rather than a timber. And if you look at the end grain there, you can hopefully see, I don't know how close I can get before it's too out of focus, that all of the ends of the little shoots are in there. So those are all individual strands. Birkey's in the house. 6 a.m. Birkey. Don't forget to catch Birkey later on today. I will give you a rundown later on. So yeah, so black palmyra, black palm. This is actually quite dense. I'm always a bit surprised because this is sort of like the root, if you like, of the grass. The trunk. That's the word I'm looking for. And that does polish up quite nicely and does work well. That is exceptionally dusty though, because it's not a consistent grain. It's not a consistent piece of timber all the way through. What's the best kind of timber to carve spoons from, please? Very good question. Carving timbers tend to be the softer hardwoods. If you're going to carve it to use it as a spoon to eat with, probably best it isn't green, but I'm not an expert on spoon carving, so I wouldn't want to 100% say, but I would be looking at something like sycamore, because it's the softer one out of the three I mentioned earlier. So beech, sycamore, and ash, the hygienic ones. I would imagine ash or sycamore would probably be the better ones for carving a spoon. I'm just going to move on to some slightly more what I would deem as exciting hardwoods. These are exotics, unless you live in Africa, in which case it's just wood. And I have here the natural color of a piece of padauk. which is that kind of fiery orange, really fiery orange. Yeah, Larry, Fruitwoods, cherry or apple. Sorry, I had forgotten those. Good point. So that's a nice fiery orange of Paduk or Paduak, P-A-D-A-U-K is the way it's spelt. I've done a video on that. I've done a video on a number of the ones I'm already talking about. So ash, beech recognition, they're all in. I do a wood recognition Wednesday series. If you have a look back through my channel, go a bit more in depth, you can better camera angles, and I demonstrate how well it turns or carves or scorches and things like that. Next one I'm going to briefly mention. Oak is not, Glyn, oak is not necessarily naturally antibacterial. It depends on how high the tannin count is in it. So because it's got tannins in it, that can be an issue, particularly if some people react to them. So if you think of tannins that you might get in tea or in wine, that's the other one I'm thinking of, they can affect the flavor of a lot of things. So it's a bit of a some people say, oh, that's antibacterial, and other people disagree because it can adjust the taste, basically. So it depends very much on the oak. There you go. Someone else cutting in there. Definitely cherry on all their spoons. Fantastic. So that's a good word. It looks pretty as well. Haven't brought any out for my store with me. So this is a piece of Purple Heart. It's not as vibrant on the screen, unfortunately, but that is the natural color of the timber there. It's best wood for a complete beginner to use at first. Amy, it depends on what you're doing. So if you were to you do wood turning, carving, anything using hand tools, and you're looking at hardwoods, the best woods to use if you're wanting something soft because you're doing carving, then you want to look at something like some sycamore or some, if I can reach my piece of it, some basswood. I've got my first attempt at the wizard slash Father Christmas type thing there. Basswood, lime, that kind of stuff. If you're wood turning, something like sycamore. If you are literally just you're playing, try not to use softwoods, particularly anything free is good, but it's not always good wood. So if you're ripping pallets apart, you've got to be careful because they can be tannalized or coated in all sorts of chemicals. So sanding that and breathing it in is not a good idea. Working with it with bare hands is not a good idea. I've never used mulberry. W. Bradburn just saying that at the moment, so I can't comment on that, unfortunately. You want to work in our wood store for free, Rich? What, my personal one here or at my workplace? For those of you who don't know, I work at a shop called Yandles, which has quite a large range of woods for sale in plank form and wood turning blanks and all kinds of stuff. And we sell woodworking tools and machinery. I'm not going to plug them today. But if you want to send me a private message on Instagram, I'm quite happy to talk to you about that later on. And someone else just mentioned balsa wood for carving as well. Balsa wood is good for carving. Getting hold of it, bizarrely enough, getting hold of it in a decent sized piece, depending on where you are, can be tricky because a lot of that gets processed into the much smaller items. So I lost my train of thought of where I was originally going. I mentioned Purple Heart. It's one that's an awful lot of people's favorite. It's one that if we are selling to customers and they tend to have their partners with them, seems to end up in the basket more frequently than if people are potentially shopping on their own. It's an exceptionally dense wood again, really dense. And interesting thing about Purple Heart is when you first start working with it, if you're sanding it, turning it, or whatever, it will go brown. And it only becomes purple after exposure to UV light. And it will, over time, gradually get less purple and go back to a darker brown, reddish brown again as well. particularly if you leave it in a windowsill or if you haven't put a finish over it. So that's quite often will be used on all sorts of things like inlays on musical instruments, or just as an entire piece on its own. Accent pieces. Okay, so Dennis Beamish, want to try segmenting. If using different woods, do I have to align the grains, or can face grain be laminated to end grain? Can softwoods be used with hardwoods? I would avoid using softwoods with hardwoods because they will dry and expand and contract at quite rapidly different rates. End grain and side grain, again, you want to try and align it so it's all side grain on the outside together. There is, if you give me a second, the guy you want to speak to is Peter J. Miller, 1981. I will put his link into the bio here. That's the guy that I know that I would recommend speaking to about end grain turning. Or you've got Sean evelegh, if I can find him as well. There we go. Who has also done quite a lot. And he's also worked quite a lot from a furniture perspective. So catch either of those two guys, and I'm sure they'll be happy to answer your questions on things like segmenting, turning. Okay, what else have we got here? Okay, let's talk a little bit about figure. Figure in wood, what does it mean? And my personal favorite on figure in wood, and I buy far too much of this, is on sycamore or maple, and I hope this is going to show up okay. So you can see those lines crossing it there. So some people call that curl, some people call it flaming, some people call it rippling, because it does look like there's ripples in the top of a piece of wood. Other people have used the term quilting. I get a bit pedantic about that because quilting isn't straight lined. It tends to have sort of circulars like a quilt on a bed on it, and it's much more sought after and harder to find. And where this is formed by a variety of different things, it tends to be visible depending on the way the timber's been cut. And it also, it can be shown in a variety of different ways. So I've got a piece of another timber here called pink ivory, and without even putting the water on that, you can see the shape in that. Pink ivory is called pink ivory because it's pink and because it's as dense as ivory. And that one carves really well, particularly with sort of a high-speed tool or turning with that. If you want to see pink ivory used well, BC Woodworks uses it on some of his mallets. If I put in BC Woodworks, or Woodworks BC or BC Woodworks, if you haven't bought Brian's mallets, well worth looking at. Good wood to use for outside projects such as signs. There are mixed opinions on this. Personally, I quite like sapele, S-A-P-E-L-E. So sapele is from the mahogany family, and one of the reasons why I like it is it goes quite well outdoors. It's quite a close grain. It's also really good if you want to CNC a sign. It also takes paint quite well if you want to paint something or stain it, and you can varnish it. I would argue that's one of the better one for going outside. And I've got a question from Fiona for Andy in a minute. Let me finish answering this one. You can also use woods that are naturally oiling. So something like teak, although harder to get these days due to deforestation, or iroko, which is in the teak family. Personally, I do not touch iroko for two reasons. One, it likes to bend for a living. Two, the dust from it is highly carcinogenic, i.e. cancerous if you breathe it in. No wood dust is good, but various species can be even worse. Right, okay. I hope that answers your question. Larry, if not, drop me a DM and I can talk to you about a few other options. Best wood for a dog to chew on, and what are the flight characteristics of the different woods for a game of fetch? And that is from Fiona. I would imagine Fiona's got an awful lot more experience in that realm than I possibly have, as I'm a cat owner. Sorry to say, Andy. But that's going to weigh up on density and moisture content and also aerodynamics. So I hope, Andy, that you trim your pieces of wood respectively in order to fly better for Fiona, to give her the necessary run around and experience that she wants. Okay. Lovely. You're welcome, Amy. Michael Stratton talking about Cocobolo. Cocobolo is from the rosewood family. There are about 150 odd species of rosewood, or the Dalbergia series, if you're going to look at the Latin name. And Cocobolo is one of them. I do have a piece. And just to give you an example, well, in fact, I'll leave the sticker on. So that is a piece of heavily waxed Cocobolo. All right. Now, a lot of rosewoods will give you, or as Michael said, he stays well away from, because it brings you a terrible rash. I think it's something like 1 in 10 people react to rosewoods. So Indian rosewood, Cocobolo, kingwood. I've got some examples of kingwood here as well. Kingwood is actually vibrant purple when you freshly cut it. If you want to see, I'm doing an awful lot of shout outs on Instagram here. Example though, sorry, before I shout out. So this piece of Cocobolo it's a foot long by just over 4 inches wide by about 2 inches thick. Okay. If you want that European measurements, 305 mil by 105 mil by 50 mil. That was £33 for that piece of timber, because it's harder to get hold of. It's on the CITES register, that's CITES, which means it is limited in its allowing of travel. If it was registered on CITES, it was already in the country. It's allowed to be sold within the country that it was in, but it is not allowed to just be shipped out anywhere else. So a lot of Indian rosewood was used on certainly fretboards for acoustic and electric guitars. And even some very famous performers have discovered, since that got put on the CITES register, that their guitars are getting confiscated as they fly internationally, particularly if they haven't got the appropriate paperwork. And some of them were even destroyed in order to stop smuggling, even though it's clearly a musical instrument. I think it was someone like Bruce Springsteen or someone else like that had this situation happen to them, and there was quite a report about it a number of years ago. So yeah, I jumped ahead onto those. I was going to mention someone who does an awful lot of work with certainly a bit of Cocobolo and a bit of kingwood, and that's Matt Estlea. I'm directing an awful lot of people away from my live chat here. There we go. So we're 33 minutes in. 53 viewers. Just going to remind everyone that this is part of the Virtual Craft Festival. The person after me who will be actually making something, I hope, is Dale from Maple Tree Studios. It'll be on from 1 till 2. And there is a whole host of people who have got a list right the way throughout the day. It's well worth speaking to them, going and catching them in their live stream. And I will pull that up in a little bit. In fact, I won't load that up because that's probably going to affect my streaming. So where else are we? I basically, guys, I have got an entire pile of wood I can just keep working my way through, but I'm aware that's not necessarily the most fascinating of content. So is there any particular other questions that you guys had while I'm sort of having a fertile around? American black walnut, what's it good for? American black walnut is good for pretty much everything internal. So American black walnut is a lovely chocolatey brown. I'm sure I've got some somewhere, but I couldn't see it just now in my wood store. The only downside to American black walnut is that despite being a hardwood and being close grained, it's softer than others. So if you dig your thumbnail into it, and that's a really good hardness test. So if you dig your thumbnail into it, it will leave a dent. So you don't want to use it on anything like you could make a tabletop out of it, but you've got to be aware that you're probably going to get dents and marks and stuff left into that quite quickly. It's a really good accent thing. It's good for I've seen it on like coffee table legs, which is great if you haven't got pets and you're unlikely to kick them and things. It can look gorgeous. It's a lovely timber. It's also got a really nice smell to it. Really nice smell to black walnut. Price of hardwoods in the US is a big issue. Also, prepared blanks are expensive here as well. Larry, yeah, there's quite a big discrepancy. So obviously, Cocobolo and things like that tend to be African. Kingwood can be Mexican or African. There's Mexican Cocobolo as well. And all of this stuff, we've got to be aware as craftspeople that just because it's pretty doesn't mean it's going to last forever. This isn't necessarily sustainable. So the price should always reflect the availability, in my opinion. See you later, Andy. A lot of the Indian rosewood and things like that do get bought up very quickly by people like Martin Guitars, Gibson, Fender, and stuff like that because they want to maintain the stuff they've been doing for years. BB Turning, I have a block of what I've been told is rosewood. It is very dense, red in color, no figure to speak of, finishes like glass. Would you have any idea of the type? Yeah. If you send me some pictures, BB Turning, to my Instagram, try and take pictures of end and signed grain, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. If it finishes like glass and it is super dense and it is red in color, it is quite possible it's actually Bubinga. If you give me a minute, I'll go grab a piece from next door. And because, as I said, there's 150 different species of rosewood. And they include things like Goncalo alves, which is also known as tiger wood. It's a bright orange. It's got black tiger stripes through it, and it's a really oily wood. I appreciate the positivity coming from the comments, guys. I'll get you a piece of Bubinga in just a second. Good for high gloss dark finials on black walnut. Black walnut is great for all that kind of stuff. It will turn really well. You can get some really nice definition off it. It will carve quite nicely. Give me a second, guys. A couple of you have asked for a couple of questions. Mediterranean oak, I've not worked with before. Is it softwood? It leaves like oak shape, but points like holly on the edge and is evergreen. Ironically, I'm not good at recognizing leaves. I'm not good at recognizing bark. But give me a second. I'm just going to grab these other two pieces. I'll be right back and keep the questions coming. Let me mute myself before I just make a horrific noise. Okay, remember to unmute. So, Bubinga, where's my spray bottle over here? So again, this is one of the rosewoods. BB Turning, when you sand it, and this is going to sound an odd question, does it smell like baby vomit? Is it quite acrid? Because if it is, then it's probably Bubinga. Super dense, again, easy to carve and things like that, but and will polish really, really nicely. But it's not a timber that I like sanding. Okay, now Mike Stratton, you're into thread chasing. I will have to chat to you another time. I've always wanted to try thread chasing. So for those of you who don't know, thread chasing is putting thread into wood, basically, so you can then screw it into something. I haven't got near to me the thing I was going to talk about to do with thread chasing. Used to be used an awful lot on the back of knobs for drawers and cabinets and stuff. That there is a piece of box elder with a little bit of mold on the edges. And this is one that was given to me in 2017. I keep wanting to put it over there, even though the camera's here. Box is readily identifiable on the outside because of its shape and because of its type of grain. So the grain structure there, it doesn't follow like the normal linear lines. It shoots off to the sides, and it's quite soft. It's almost like I was going to say cardboardy. That's not quite. It's a spongy grain. Basically, it's a spongy bark on it. So that is a very nice piece of boxwood, and I will be doing a talk. We're doing a video about that in the future. So the wood recognition series, I basically started because I noticed that there wasn't an awful lot of content about that on YouTube, and I know there's a lot of people who ask questions about it. I've got access to a lot of different kinds of wood, as it might become apparent, and I enjoy researching about it. Speaking of which, I'll get to that in just a moment. I can tell you where I get some of my information on. A lot of it was gained through working for a year at Crimson Guitars. And for those of you who haven't followed Crimson, well, he's got enough subs now, hasn't he? I don't need to tell you to go over there. Ben Crow at Crimson Guitars took me in as an apprentice for a year. And well, he took me in for longer than that. I left after a year for various different reasons, all of which were amicable. And he taught me a huge amount, more than I realized, about hardwoods and identifying them. And I worked with them every day, which helps you learn bits about them as well. And now I work, as I said, for a company that sells them. So I work with them there, and I turn with them and just keep growing my knowledge. It's a subject that's fascinating to me. And it's something that I don't always understand why other woodworkers don't want to know more about the timber they're working with, not from a point of view of preservation or anything like that, but I suppose once you start working with it, you would understand that, oh, it's softer in this regard, or it splits more, it's not going to work well, or it's oily, or you need to pre-drill it before you put a screw in it because it's more likely to split, or things like that. But it's not. I don't know. I like to find out a lot of things before I start things. Basically, I procrastinate, and this was like the ultimate procrastination. So other than YouTube and personal experience, I've got a few books that I would recommend to people who are wanting to identify timber or wood. This is a really good one, and it comes in large and smaller format. So that's by a guy called Terry Porter, Wood Identification and Use. And it's basically gives you a page with a picture of the wood and the tree shape and the shape of the leaves, and then a description of what it's commonly used for. So for instance, let's just grab one. Who was it earlier? Let's see if they've got Mediterranean oak. Let's see if they've got Mediterranean oak in here. They might well not have. So this is now just going to be a video of me looking up some stuff. Okay, EFGHI. Mahogany, maple, bark. No, they skip over it. They don't have it listed in there. Got mock orange though, which is always entertaining. So that's one book, Wood Identification and Use by Terry Porter. Definitely recommend that one. Another one that I use quite a lot is called the Real Wood Bible. I don't know if this is still in print, by Nick Gibbs. This one's more of a Filofax version, so it stays flat open in the workshop, which is really handy. And what they also do is they've got a whole page dedicated to the grain, and half of it that's been oiled or finished, and the other half that isn't. So that one can be really useful for that kind of thing. And again, it gives you key characteristics, and it gives you the Latin names for it and all that kind of stuff. So that's a good resource. If those two get to the point where that's great for you to just grab, but you want to get a bit more in depth, and we're talking like geek level in depth, you want this one. So Understanding Wood, A Craftsman Guide to Wood Technology by R. Bruce Hoadley, or I think Hoadley is how you'd pronounce it. This goes down to almost the molecular level on timber. So if I just grab, I mean, you know, it's got points on there about the specific gravity of water in relation to timbers and where things would be. So rosewood is on the density scale is a 1, lignum vitae, which is one of the most dense woods and actually won't float, it will sink, is a 1.2, and then balsa wood is about a 0.15. So there's all that kind of info in there, and then they've got slices through of under microscopes of the grain and structure and identifications on things. It talks about resin, it talks about the sugar deposits in timber. Fascinating, very much a textbook of reference. I've tried reading through it. I've got to about chapter 3 or 4, and I can only read 1 or 2 pages at a time, and quite often will find myself rereading them. But really, really interesting book on that as well. So JP, question, most popular South African woods internationally? That's a really interesting question. Oh, it's holm oak is the stuff in the Mediterranean region. Ah, that makes sense. Cerus section of the genus with acorns that mature in single. Yeah, holm oak. Holm oak is a hardwood. Thank you for that, Circular Wood by Keith. That's really useful. I'm always keen to improve my knowledge. I would never claim to be an expert. Most popular South African woods internationally. I don't know if there's really a way to direct translate that. You could probably correlate that with export sales, but then that depends on whether they're being used for you know, construction timber or things like that. There's not really a really obvious one. It depends on what's in fashion as well. You've got to remember that, for instance, I've got a load of old cabinet doors that were made from 1700s, 1800s, and a lot of those are actually, the frames are made from mahogany, which to me is like, okay, yeah, that's brilliant. That's a really nice wood. It's kind of this lustrous orangey red. And then what they've done is they've my brain's gone as to what the stuff that they, very thin pieces of wood on the outside of it. There's a term for it, and my brain's just lost it. Very thin pieces of wood on the outside of it, made out of rosewood, because rosewood's harder to get. So rosewood was popular in furniture, and an awful lot of old school furniture you'll find rosewood or fake rosewood. Veneer, that's the word I was looking on. VENWR, stuck to the front of it, normally with what they call hide glue. So you'd have a little pot boiling and stick that on there. Turkey oak. Turkey oak is actually found throughout Europe. It's just one of the species of oak. It was probably originally identified in Turkey, which is why they call it Turkey oak. Laminate, yes, is one of the words, but veneer is the one I was thinking of, Kim. Thank you, though. Turkey oak is, as I say, yeah, it is quite commonly found throughout Europe. It's just that if it ever makes it to a shop, people will just call it oak because it's easier to identify, and it has a lot of the same properties. I have got... that's what I was going to talk about next. So, if we talk briefly about bark, I have here some pieces of eucalyptus bark. Now, the eucalyptus tree, other than keeping certain animals completely stoned all year round is a really interesting timber, or really interesting tree. So for one part of the year, it just looks like an awful lot of other tree, and it just looks like it's quite a smooth, flattish bark. It's not got sort of those ridges on it, but it sheds all year round. It doesn't. What am I talking about all year round? It sheds its bark almost like a snake. And the weird thing is that quite often the tree will grow twisted as well, some of the branches, and it will become these vibrant, almost like rainbow kind of Play-Doh colors. So you can end up with like greens and purples and pinks and yellows all together on the tree. We actually have one of these in our village, which I didn't realize for 3 years until we were taking a walk at the right time of year where these colors were being exposed and the bark was dropping off, which is round about now. And I've got a small stack of this because I don't know why, I just kind of feel like this is something that it could be used for something. It's not necessarily very strong. I refuse to cast any of it in resin, not because I've got anything against resin, but I just kind of feel like that's a cop out, and that, you know, there must be another way of doing it. I've had someone suggest binding it and gluing it and making it into sort of brush handles and things, so I might do that in some time. Hodgepodge Woodworks, what is my favorite wood? And don't say it depends on the application. To be honest with you, it doesn't depend on the application. I have one hardwood which is my favorite above all others, and that's mostly because it's the first hardwood I worked with, and that is actually sapele. It's a very dusty wood, which some people don't like, particularly wood turners, but I like it because it's very versatile. It doesn't tend to move massively. It's paintable, it's stainable, you can get rippled versions of it, it's quite dense, it's easy to shape, it's easy to make furniture out of, it's exterior grade. So I like sapele a lot. That's probably my favorite timber. It would be then closely followed by black walnut, but as I've said, that's not as versatile. So thanks for the question. Appreciate that, BB Turning. I'll have a look at Instagram later. We've got 8 minutes left. One of your favorite woods is Pal Rosa, but it seems to have gone up in price and becomes tad scarce. Yep, that's because that is definitely one of the rosewoods again, and for the same reasons as mentioned earlier, it's probably on the CITES register, CITES. So guys, we're getting near the end of the live stream. I know we've got about 8 minutes left. Just remember that we've got Dale over at Maple Tree Studios is going to be live next from 1 till 2. I believe he's most likely going to be doing some scroll sawing. And any of you who aren't aware of the Virtual Craft Festival, there's been 2 videos on already. We had JP making a nice bowl, and we had Rich from the Beard 16. He made a really nice butterfly. I hadn't seen that product before. Quite intrigued to have a go at that myself. And their videos will be up on YouTube, and it goes right the way through till 2 a.m. UK time. I believe that's 5 or 6 p.m. over in the States. And it all will be going forever. JP, if you could put the full lineup in the comments, that would be really good. That would be really useful, and I can then read it out easily. Question from JP: is all walnut prone to flying off the lathe when I'm speed turning, or just American walnut? I think depending on the depth of your cut there, Jamie, and how quickly you try to do things, it might, it's the aerodynamic properties of that outside shape that you made. I was quite impressed though. It did go quite well. You were doing pretty well up until that point. JP from Potgiet, apologies if I'm murdering your surname there, Woodturning. Camphor wood. Now that interests into something else. So some woods, such as camphor, have a really, really overbearing smell when you process them. And I think it was camphor that I worked on when I was at Crimson Guitars once with Ben. And it gave me a pounding headache within like 15 seconds of smelling any of that once I put it through a disc sander. A drum sander. And I need to make you a mod if I do that. All right, okay, fine. I will have to pull that up myself. I should have made you a moderator before I started, shouldn't I? I will get there, guys. This has been fun. I hope you've all enjoyed it. I imagine some of you must have done, because 50 odd of you have stuck with me right the way through. Okay, so I'm gonna chuck it in there. Just taken direct from Jamie Page's. Oh, that's broken it up. Interesting. So just to run down. So where are we? Can't make that any larger. Okay, so you've just been watching me. You've got Dale Kirkwood from Maple Tree Studios next, and then you've got I'm not going to be able to read all of those on there because I'm looking at a tiny screen. Emad Studios or ewood_Q8 on Instagram from 2 till 3. Costas from 3 till 4. SK Crafts, I'll have to drop in on that one as well, 4 till 5. Andi Heal from AH Bespoke at 5 till 6. Rebecca Degroot, 6 till 7. And Cammy's Garage from 7 till 8. Andy Birkey, 8 till 9. Mixed Media Girl, 9 till 10. Make with Miles, 10 till 11. NV Woodworks, 11 till 12. And Moonpie Creations, 12 to 1 a.m. And then finishing up with Woodshop TV, Carl Jacobson himself, from 1 till 2 p.m. 1 till 2 a.m. Sorry, our time. Appreciate it. Appreciate the love. I'm sorry this time I didn't make a project, but I've done a huge amount of information dumped in you there for the hour, and I better go have some lunch in just a moment. And any of you who found that interesting, and if you did want to learn a bit more, please subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram. I actually peaked 500 subs this week, which was really nice. And then woke up this morning, was back to 499, but I am back up to 501 now. So that's great. And I'm currently on a brief hiatus from videos purely because I'm trying to get my revamped wood store finished. But once that is up and done in the next month or so, hopefully, I will be back doing an awful lot of stuff within the next fortnight or so. So we're at 57 minutes. I would urge you to go and, as I'm going to, let's go and see how Dale's doing. And let's have a look at Maple Tree Studios. Let's see how he is doing, if he is prepped and ready. Oh, and you can tell him from me, I have to apologize. I've just subscribed to him. I didn't already. That's very rude of me. So, thanks to everyone. Thanks for stopping by. You need to be standing in the corner of your workshop. I'm happy, Robert. Anytime you want to just send a picture over, then you can do that. Scroll saw ready wood. The closest we sell to that is 1 inch thick, so probably not. But that would be bass and lime, which you can use for scroll sawing, but it's probably a bit soft depending on what you're wanting to do. But we can sell you a bandsaw so you can make your own wood scroll saw ready. No problem at all there, John. Okay, guys, I'm not going to wait it out to the very end, but thank you very much for stopping by. If there's anything you missed or anything you wanted to look back over, this will be live. I'm going to make it on the channel, and I'll catch you guys again soon. Thank you very much. Keep supporting the Virtual Craft Festival. See you again.